Father Charles Connor celebrated recently his 25th anniversary of ordination. And many of you know him from his history programs, his catechism classes. Now he's teaching on EWTN. Our seminarians have him for class at Mount St. Mary's. And so Brother Matthew and I went there to Carbondale, Pennsylvania for the anniversary Mass and celebration. And if you want to send him a note too, that would be a nice thing to do for his 25th and all he's done for EWTN. But Brother Matthew and I had returned from Carbondale. We're sitting in the Philadelphia airport, and this man comes up and sits across from me, and he begins to tell me how in grammar school he had been taught by the Franciscans, in high school he'd been taught by the Jesuits, and in graduate school he'd been taught by the Christian Brothers. And I said, "Boy, you must really be confused." And we laughed, and then he told me that for the last 40 years he's been a psychologist, and he works in the Phoenix area, especially among the very needy. And there was a question that he had in his own mind: why are some people resilient? Why are people who are in similar circumstances, there are those that are just totally despairing and despondent, and others who seem to be resilient, that they're able to rise above it? And so as a psychologist, he was wondering, what is the difference? They're in the same circumstances, and yet one is downcast and the other is resilient. And so this has been like the focus of his own studies over the years. In fact, he's been giving conferences on this topic to different psychological conferences. And so I said, well, what do you think is the key to mental health, to being resilient? And I said, having a good laugh. And he said, well, yes, we should have one of those every day. But he said that we have 4 banks of assets. So imagine that you've got a good fortune, you've got 4 different banks, and you've got assets in each of those banks. And so these assets that we have, he said, the first is a biological asset that we can draw upon in those times of difficulties in our lives that enable us to have resilience. And so people typically have assets in these 4 banks, maybe not all 4 of them, but at least in some of them. And the first is a biological, he said, that the person's getting enough rest and nutrition and their health, they're maintaining their health, they're doing those things that are necessary for our biological, physical well-being. So that's the first bank that a person can draw on to be resilient. The second, he said, is a psychological bank, that the person has certain coping mechanisms. You know, there are bad coping mechanisms to deal with the troubles of our life, and then there's healthy mechanisms. A bad coping mechanism was, well, I'm going to turn to alcohol or drugs. I'm going to try to numb that pain of this situation that I'm going through. But there are healthy ways for us to cope with the troubles of our life. Maybe not so healthy, but often something that children would do. You think of Linus with his security blanket. So he's going to get his security blanket, a time of difficulties. But what are some healthy coping mechanisms? Something like humor can help us to take things a little bit more lightly and to look at the eternal perspective. What does this have to do with eternity? Secondly, to see it as a path to growth. There's that saying that's been going around, whatever doesn't kill you helps you grow stronger, So to see it that it's going to be something that will help me to grow stronger in some way. Talking it out with someone about the difficulty, being able to talk that, express it out. Exercise, focusing on something positive, gratitude. Forgiveness is a great coping mechanism that helps us kind of deal with the tragedies and difficulties of life. A third bank, he said, is the social bank. so that the person has at least one person who cares, who is interested in their life, who wants them to do better. They have at least one person that they can turn to who is interested in their life, who wants them to help them and to assist them. They have family, they have friends that can support them in their times of difficulty. And then the fourth, and at the conclusion of our conversation, he said, I'm beginning to see more and more that this is the most important one, and that is the spiritual bank. And he told me for many, many years and even decades, the psychological world would have nothing to do with the spiritual. It was just totally focused on, behavioral sociology and psychology and these sorts of theories. But he says that's not so much the case anymore. They're beginning to see the powerful impact that the spiritual has on the person. Did you hear about the story last year of this 9-year-old boy in Atlanta? His name was Willie Merrick. And he was playing in his parents' front yard, and this man abducted him, forced him into his car. And so he's driving away. He's taking Willie, doesn't know where. And Willie begins to sing this praise song. Every praise is to our God. And just continues to sing this praise song that he had heard in his church. He sings it over and over and over again. The guy says, shut up. But he just keeps singing this praise to God. He keeps singing it over and over. Shut up. He just keeps singing this praise to God. And eventually the guy says, get out of here. So he gets him out of the car. And this little 9-year-old boy then was free. And he's going around telling this story. But you see, he had this resource in this terrible, terrifying time for a 9-year-old boy. He had this spiritual resource that he could draw upon that gave him that strength in that time of trial, that he could turn to God, that he could even sing his praises in this terrifying time with trust and confidence in God's providence. Now, we all need to be resilient. And we live in times that are very challenging today. And we're all tempted to just kind of give in to despondency or despair, to just give up, that where's our country headed? But we have to have this resilience that says, no, God is still God. And the truth is still the truth. And regardless of what even a Supreme Court judge might say, the truth is still the truth. God is the author of marriage. He's designed how it is. And that is the way it is. Even if there are those that want to deny that that's the truth, nonetheless, it is the truth. And so we have to have that resilience that says God is God, and we can trust in him. In the most recent issue of the National Catholic Register, I liked very much Michael Warsaw's article, his short little article. He's a publisher of the Register, the CEO of EWTN, and he quotes a book by Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen, a book on the 7 virtues. And there's some quotes that I wanted to mention that Michael has in this article. You can find it in the Register. Here's Archbishop Sheen. The soul is gone, and what we call change is only decay. So when the soul, when the spirit is gone, there may be change, but what that change really is decay. And Archbishop Sheen continued, how to stop it, except by reversing the process by which we drove God out of the world, namely by relighting the lamp of faith in the souls of men. So how are we going to reverse that trend except to relight the lamp of faith in the souls of men? That's why Mother founded this network. But that's a task for all of us. And it's not always a welcome message, is it? We see that in the first reading, the prophet Amos. He's prophesying in the northern kingdom, and he's told, get out of here, visionary. Go down south to Judah. We don't want to hear your message here. And Amos says, I was no prophet. I didn't belong to a company of prophets. I was a shepherd, a dresser of sycamores, but the Lord called me. Well, the Lord called you. He called me. If we're baptized, and even more so by our confirmation, we are being sent like those apostles in today's gospel. He sends them out. He sends them out to proclaim the gospel. And how are they to go? They're to go depending totally on divine providence. They're not going to take anything with them. Well, aren't we like that ourselves, that sometimes we may feel unequal to the task as before us, the challenges of our society and its decline? But the Lord sends us out and he says, depend on my providence. Depend on my grace. Depend on my light. Every praise be to our God. Right? So we can sing his praises and we can trust that he's going to help us to make a difference, to have an impact on our own society. And Michael, his own words, he says, this is our mission as Catholic men and women. And now we're being called to be even more resolute in our faith. Perhaps that's a good thing for us. That no longer can a Catholic remain lukewarm. If they will, they're just going to be eaten up by society. But we have to be even more resolute in our faith. That we're going to be faithful to the Lord. We're going to be faithful to his word. We're going to be faithful to his truth, whatever may come. And Michael says, so to set an example for future generations of Christians. We often recount the saints in previous generations as models for us. That's what we're called to be for future generations. To be those models of virtue and integrity and fidelity to the Lord, whatever may come. And finally, Michael concluded with another quote from that book of Archbishop Sheen. We need someone to be healthy when the world is sick. Someone to be a stretcher bearer when the battlefields are freighted with wounded. Someone to be calm when the house is burning. Someone to be right when the world is wrong. That's our mission, right? Because there's a beauty to truth. There's a beauty to goodness. There's a beauty to living as God intends us to live. The Catechism in its section on the sixth commandment, which is on thou shalt not commit adultery, has a section on the integrity of the person. You see, living a chaste life, a pure life, whether one has heterosexual tendencies or homosexual tendencies, we are all called to live a chaste and a pure life, which really leads to our integrity, our wholeness, not having all of our energies dissipated and divided and torn within. But it's to lead us, this virtue leads us rather to an integrity, a wholeness, a togetherness, if you will, of our very being. And this section in the Catechism is well worth reading. It's just like a page long. The chaste person maintains the integrity of the powers of life and love placed in him. This integrity ensures the unity of the person. Chastity includes an apprenticeship in self-mastery, which is a training in human freedom. The alternative is clear. either man governs his passions and finds peace, or he lets himself be dominated by them and becomes unhappy. Do you want to be dominated by your passions, or do you want to be that free man, that free woman who's free to love, free to live a life for God and the fullness of life in him? But realistically, the Catechism also says this self-mastery is a long and exacting work. It's not done in a day or a week or a year. It's a challenging effort, isn't it? It presupposes renewed effort at all stages of life. Chastity has laws of growth, which progress through stages marked by imperfection and too often by sin. But we're called then to live that beautiful virtue. Dietrich von Hildebrand said, purity is reverence. It's a reverence for other people. It's a reverence for ourselves. It's a reverence for God. There is, perhaps you've seen it, but it's free on the internet. There's a documentary called The Third Way. And you can find this on the internet, The Third Way. And what it talks about are these people who had struggled with same-sex attraction in their own lives. And for some of them, they just indulged in that lifestyle, but it didn't leave them that happiness that they were seeking. It wasn't until they found the Lord that they found that freedom. And that's true for anyone, as I said, whatever our tendencies are. That is not being dominated by our passions, but guiding them, governing them. That's where we find that true freedom and that lasting joy that the Lord wants for all of us. So remember those words, that we have these assets. How do we become resilient? Well, this psychologist came to the conclusion that the biggest bank that makes a person resilient is to rely on the Lord. They have a relationship with him. That's true for us today in our own challenging time. We are called to be the saints that future generations will look back and say, there were people who had courage, who stood fast, even in those challenging times. And let us be like them.